Hey, good afternoon, everyone. TJ Alt along with Dr. Philip Keiser, who is our local health authority and for Galveston County joining us. Sorry we missed out last week, folks, but glad to have everyone back. Hopefully, Dr. Keiser, you had a good holiday weekend, Labor Day weekend for yourself.
Yeah, I did. It was very restful, and I tried not to think about COVID for 3 days.
And how hard was that, though?
It's pretty hard.
Yeah.
We're constantly bombarded with it,
Yeah.
and it's not surprising that people are finding it just oppressive after such a long period of time.
We're looking at things now, and the latest data. And of course, there wasn't much released over the weekend because of the holiday weekend. So we were just now, right before we went on the air today. Thus the delay here of we have another 825 additional positive COVID-19 cases. At the same time, 821 current cases, and then 4 caught up from there. But also a large number of deaths related. Now, granted, this is catching up, but many of those last of August coming in. And the one consistently here on these, as we've pointed out, is that most of them are not vaccinated. There are a few folks who are either partially or fully vaccinated here that along the ways. But, we get that every time we've done this show, for example, we will get the comments saying, so what you're telling me is that people are vaccinated or dying of this too. And I wonder, we talked about that. You provided an excellent data. And one of the things we probably should do every week is the chances are, and not just kind of run this down for folks, but can you tell us really just percentage wise, people who are getting hospitalized and having serious illness, how many are unvaccinated? How many are vaccinated there? Because that's where it comes down to, is the numbers, correct?
Right. Yeah. So, when we look at our number of deaths, I think I don't know what this will be now. It'll be like about 158 or so of people that have died so far. 9 of them have been vaccinated. So I think that speaks for itself. Most of the people that have died who were vaccinated were elderly and had comorbid conditions. And but what we're seeing now is that people are dying. Are tending to be younger, because most of the people in the county that are over 65 are vaccinated. We've got over 85% of the people in the county over 65 have gotten at least 1 shot in their arm. So in terms of preventing death, the vaccine is really good. And then when we look at hospitalizations, we're probably up to about 50 or 60 hospitalizations among people that have been vaccinated, compared to thousands of people that have not been vaccinated. And then we also look at something called breakthroughs. And breakthroughs are those people that have been vaccinated who got COVID. Now we're over 1,000. Okay. So that's not an insubstantial amount. But remember, we're pushing 50,000 people who have actually gotten COVID in the county. We're above 45,000 at this point. And so when you look at that, that's really just a very, very small number. So the vaccines so far are holding up, and they're doing their job. And their job is to prevent people from dying. Their job is to prevent people from getting sick enough to be in the hospital. They're doing that. And their job is to prevent infections. Is it perfect? No. And so we do see sometimes where getting the vaccine does not protect people from one of those outcomes.
One of the things we'll go ahead and take a look at now is as we look at the current hospitalizations from COVID-19 in Galveston County. Now, again, we want to point out these are Galveston County residents.
That's right.
Just because they're in a Galveston County hospital does not mean that's counted in this chart. I want to, that's something we need to stress here, is that these are Galveston County residents in the hospital because of COVID-19. The largest number of those right now is we have a little over, we have 69 men and 48 women in right now. The largest number of those are people 61 to 70 years old. But then you're seeing these cases, 24 who are in their 50s.
Yeah.
There are 15 people who are in their 40s. And this is something we didn't see before the vaccines, which is interesting to me. 9 people are in their 30s, another 8 in their 20s.
Yeah.
What is it about? And you were saying 95% roughly of folks who are in the hospital are not vaccinated. What is it about this variant compared to the original variant we were seeing last year when there was no vaccines, that is making the change here that we're seeing younger adults particularly getting sick enough to be hospitalized, because we weren't seeing that before.
Yeah, well, right, and I think it's a combination of things. I think one is that we're seeing a shift in the numbers solely because we're seeing fewer younger people vaccinated than older people. That's number one. Number two, the Delta variant is much more infectious, so we're seeing more people get infected, and we're seeing them get sicker faster. And we've even had some deaths that were very prominent in the news where people got symptoms and 5 days later they were dead. And so this is a more aggressive virus. It's a more aggressive form of the virus. And so I think that, coupled with the lack of vaccination, and also coupled with the fact that people are not masking and not taking precautions anymore. And, I kind of understand it. People are tired. They're tired of wearing masks and they don't want to do it. But that is part of what's making a difference. So when we talk to these folks, particularly the younger ones, they're not vaccinated. They don't think COVID's a big deal. I know they weren't wearing a mask, and they were going around and going any place they want and not worrying about it. And so because of that, I think all those things together, I think we're seeing a lot more younger people come in and getting sick.
And if we break it down by communities, while for the longest time, League City, the city with the largest population, had the most number of folks that were hospitalized or sick. We're seeing actually Galveston and Texas City are now those. Is there any type of trend that goes along with that right now?
Yeah, so Galveston and Texas City are kind of funny because if you go look at it by zip code, there's some zip codes in Galveston and Texas City which are really great and some which are not very good at all. And so, but what they correlate with is where areas of people that are not as well vaccinated, particularly in Texas City. Where we are seeing some uniformity is like Santa Fe and Hitchcock, and those have the lowest rates of vaccination and the highest rates of COVID overall. Now, you're not seeing the numbers quite as high, in part because there's fewer people living there, because these tend to be more rural parts of the county. But those are the places that I would say are really disproportionately affected.
And then we're seeing as well, as I said, one of the deaths reported today was someone in the 80s, fully vaccinated, who passed away on August the 30th. Was a man in that time. And as we take a look at that, what do we now see? Are we seeing initially we were seeing an increase in vaccinations? The vaccination, should point out, the drive-through vaccination clinic just to the hours this week, but there are, you can go at any given time, pretty easy to get an appointment. But are we seeing a boost in the number of people wanting to be vaccinated right now, or are we seeing that plateau again?
Yeah, it's plateaued again. We saw a big boost in around the end of July when some prominent people had died from COVID, and not just one, but so it seemed like there was a couple weeks there where it's like every other day everybody knew, or a lot of people knew, had died from COVID. So we saw a big boost in vaccinations then. But it's steadily increasing, the numbers of vaccines that are getting done, probably several thousand a week. We're up to about 68% of the county having at least one shot in the arm, and which is really very, very good. But it's taken us a month to get there. We were about 60% at the beginning of August. So it's slow but steady. It's grueling work, but we are getting people come in. Now, we have opened a drive-through because we've had a lot of demand for boosters, but we are giving people who are unvaccinated priority. So if you want to get vaccinated, call up or go to the website, and you can click on, and we can vaccinate you probably within the next several days.
Yeah, or the day of, actually, is one of those.
Oh,
things.
Yeah.
I know I was able to log in standing in the parking lot.
Oh, really?
My booster. Now I point out my booster. Log in,
get
it through the app, and had an appointment within 15 minutes. And I was parked in the parking lot already, so I just walked in.
Yeah.
And as folks have seen, I've shown the video of that when I got my booster. So the process works pretty quickly. There as well. We're already getting some questions in, and this is one I was going to go to in some subject matter anyway. Stan Van Hoord, one of our regulars, had a quick question about the requirements for getting monoclonal antibodies We talked briefly about that, about the monoclonal antibody infusion therapy. I wanted to dive into that a little bit more because it's more than just infusion now. And for folks that may not be aware of monoclonal infusion or antibody therapy, can you talk about what that is exactly and how it works and why it is beneficial?
Right. So these are synthetic antibodies. They're actually made in a laboratory, and they are made to target the virus and actually target what's called the spike protein. So, we've done this before. The spike protein is a spike that sticks up on the virus that hooks onto the nose and allows the virus to get inside and make people sick. And so these antibodies are proteins that are made in a laboratory that bind it, and then it keeps the virus from getting back into to cells. And it's not just the nose; it's basically all of the cells that the virus infects. And so what happens is when people get COVID and they're starting to have symptoms, if we give them this antibody, basically hook them up to an IV and just runs these antibodies in, that goes throughout the body and it cleans out the COVID and binds them and kills it, and it keeps the process from propagating itself. With that, people often feel better right away. But more importantly, it actually prevents people from getting hospitalized. And so we've made the decision as a community, collectively, that we're going to aggressively push these monoclonal antibodies. So if someone has COVID, they have a positive test, they are having symptoms, or they're very high risk, they can make an appointment at UTMB. It can actually all be done online, and then they can get an appointment and they'll get these antibody infusions. And it actually, the time window is as much as 10 days from the time that people either first had their symptoms or had their positive test. It can be beneficial. So UTMB has worked very, very hard to develop this system whereby people can go ahead and do that. And they're doing about 100 of them a day. So it's quite amazing. That being said, there are other places in the county that have also opened up. And if you go to the Adish's website, there's a link that you can go to where it'll tell you where other places are if you're having some trouble contacting UTMB. The one thing we don't want people to do, we don't want people to wait till they're short of breath, because if they start feeling short-winded, the antibody doesn't work anymore. And in fact, we're telling people that, if you have COVID and you're feeling feverish and you have a cough, go ahead, sign up for the antibodies. But if you're feeling short of breath, go to the ER. And because we have other drugs to treat you, and which will be more effective at that stage. And we don't want people waiting while they're getting short of breath to get an antibody, which probably isn't going to work because it's gone past that stage, and then wait to delay care even more. So, that's the real distinguishing factor. If you're feeling short of breath or you're having bad diarrhea and you can't keep hydrated, go see a doctor. But if you're just, having like a normal cough and achy and flu-like symptoms, this is the way to go.
So, and again, this is when you test positive, that's kind of the first trigger.
Mm-hmm.
And you're showing some type of symptom.
That's right.
Shortness of breath.
That's right.
The second symptom. So, Stan, to answer your question, since those who didn't see Stan's question, I'll put it up again. He had 8 family members that are not in this household that tested positive in the last day or so. And he told them, but he said he couldn't tell them the requirements if there were any. This is just the kind of the guideline. There's not a requirement per se, and it's going to be vary by individual. But in this case, and is this done like an out treatment? Or
yeah, it's done as an outpatient treatment. We even have the ability to give it as an injection. So if you don't want to sit there for an hour, you can get a shot, except you got to get 4 shots. You get like 1, 2, and then 1 in each cheek. And we've had patients that do, and they go, "That's no big deal." But there are other people who go, "Oh, I can't stand needles." They'd rather have the infusion. But it's not more effective if you get the IV. A lot of times we think things are more effective if it's given intravenously, but in this case, it's not. So we have both of those options available.
I just have to chuckle. I don't like needles. I'll take the one that'll just stay in my arm, but I won't take the ones that go poke in and out. I'm that way, by the way. I should point out.
Yeah, me too. I would probably just say, "Give me the infusion."
Yeah, I would give me the IV. I'm actually one of those who. Yeah. Well, I'm chuckling at myself because I'm the same way. I just can't watch the needle go in. After that, then I'm good. All right, Stan, thanks for the question. I appreciate that. And we did have. That we're doing about treatments for COVID. Brittany LeBlanc is asked and says, "What is working? that she thinks there's a lot of information that's coming out there.
Yeah.
And that is confusing. And we're going to get into one of those subject matters that's causing a lot of confusion as well. Yeah. Because you even said, once you start having shortness of breath, then you don't want to do the monoclonal infusion. You want to go to the other steps. What is working as treatment of COVID-19?
Right. So what is working as treatment? It's basically a staged treatment at this point. And so initially, before people get too sick, have symptoms, or even are at high risk. So what that means is you may not have any symptoms at all, and or even been exposed. But if you're at high risk, these antibody treatments can keep you from getting sick. Okay, so that's step one. So once you start feeling sicker, where you would either have shortness of breath or have some other reasons you have to be hospitalized, the next step would be a drug called remdesivir. And that's something that we've talked about before, but it's fully approved by the FDA. And it's an antiviral drug that gets given into people's veins. And we give them either 5 or 10 days of it. And that can help ameliorate the symptoms. Along with that, as people progress, if they get a little worse, then we have a couple other things we can do. There are these immune modulator drugs, and there's a whole host of them. These are drugs that were developed to treat things like rheumatoid arthritis and lupus and just things that where the body has a lot of inflammation. Those have shown to be helpful. Those, again, have to be given in the hospital. And then finally, we give very high dose of steroids. And so using all of those things together have shown to really be effective and have gotten our death rate down. If you look over time at the death rate from COVID, you'll see that when this thing started, in April of last year, we were having, 3, 4, in some cases 5% of the people die. And now we're under 8%. All right. So overall, we're doing a lot better. The problem still lies in those people that end up in the ICU. Our death rates are still extremely high once people get sick enough to go in the ICU. So the real message is, if you're feeling bad and you're not sure what to do, talk to a healthcare professional. But the real key is it's monoclonal antibodies, then remdesivir, but you would have to be hospitalized for that, then the anti-inflammatory drugs and the steroids.
And then obviously a lot of talk, and it's ramped up even more so now. In fact, Stephanie Stockstill with this question about that, why are pharmacies refusing to fill doctor prescribed ivermectin? And this goes to the broader question I wanted to ask you about. And I'm hearing a lot of this. I told you I gave a speech at Rotary in Friendswood a couple weeks ago, and I had 3 people come up to me and ask a similar question, like, listen, I know this is working for folks. Can we just tackle this? Because one of the things I want to point out before you give this answer here, folks, the one thing you're going to find with Dr. Keiser is he's not in the political spectrum of this, nor has he been. We should talk about from hydrochloroquine on. He has said, listen, we'll grasp at anything we can to make this work. But let's talk about ivermectin. It got a lot more attention this past week. Joe Rogan, who's a big time podcaster, I know him from News Radio Days, actually, the TV show, I should say. Funny guy, great UFC commentator, but has a bot. And I want to quote what he actually, not quote, but say what he actually said. He said they tried ivermectin, vitamins, and they threw the kitchen sink at him. So they did everything. And one thing I think is not getting a lot of notice in here is that they did monoclonal infusion.
Yeah,
he pointed that out, but a lot of folks have focused on ivermectin as either one, the bad thing that he shouldn't have done, or the other extreme. Folks have said, oh, that's what made him better.
Yeah.
And he's very clear when he made this report that he had a whole lot of things that had done, including one we know works, which is monoclonal infusion, as well as ivermectin. And I wanted to talk about that at length now, about that, because we're talking about the human prescribed version of ivermectin. There are 2 different versions out there. There is, which they use on horses. And maybe some people are getting their hands on that and using it, but really what some doctors are, and what some in the region are doing, they are prescribing the human form of that. Talk about, so folks understand it, and what the actual studies are showing about its effectiveness.
Yeah, so let's talk about how these whole things get started to begin with. So everybody's desperate to find an oral treatment for this, right? It would just make things so much easier if you could just go to your doctor, we give you a pill, take this for 5 days and you'll get better. Unfortunately, we aren't there yet, and so what happens is that there are scientists who work in labs and they try different things to see if it'll kill COVID in a test tube. And the answer is you can find lots of things that'll kill COVID in a test tube. I dare say that this will kill COVID in a test tube. But it's hard to then say, okay, now let's try this in people and see whether it really works. So, we did this with hydroxychloroquine. And when hydroxychloroquine came out, there were a lot of people saying, oh, no, you can't do that. And, we had some discussions and we didn't know what to do. And we looked at it and we thought, well, it's pretty hard to harm yourself with hydroxychloroquine. So, it got tried. It got tried here. Some initial things in nursing homes that seemed to work pretty well. But as more and more people got treated with it and we were able to crank the numbers, it became pretty clear that hydroxychloroquine was not particularly effective. It wasn't particularly harmful either, and of course it got politicized, both locally and then nationally, with the president. And once that happens, I think people really lose perspective. So ivermectin is one of those drugs. Somebody tried in a test tube, and it seemed to work. And so then again, somehow, despite the fact there's literally hundreds of these things that people have tried in test tubes, and people are talking about, well, what's the next step? Ivermectin kind of took off, and people have been treated with it. But there's been no study to date that shows that when you give it to people, it actually changes the course of COVID. This gets really complicated because COVID is one of those diseases where you can be totally asymptomatic, where you can get it in 5 days, you feel better. You can get it and you feel bad for a whole month, where you get it and you end up in the hospital, or you get it and you can die. And so how do you determine whether it's good? So, if I'm just, a doctor working in my office, you come in and I give you ivermectin and you come back 5 days later and you say, I feel better. Well, I don't know whether you'd have felt better anyway or not. And unfortunately, some people are interpreting that as I feel better, as ivermectin worked, okay? So what we need is we need to be able to give it to similar type of people to have gotten ivermectin and people don't. And right now, there's no study like that shows that it works. What are the dangers of ivermectin? Well, unlike hydroxychloroquine, it does have more side effects. Diarrhea is a really big one. And it can have some hepatotoxicities. And there have been cases of people, particularly people who've gotten their hands on some of the animal formulations, or people that have, you can actually find ivermectin and stuff to clean out fish bowls. People have tried other things that have taken it, have gotten really, really sick. So generally, I don't think you'll find very many. There'll be some doctors that are prescribing it, but most of us in infectious diseases are not prescribing it. But it also brings up another issue, specifically that question: how is it that a pharmacist can refuse to prescribe a drug that's prescribed by a doctor? And the answer is that the Pharmacy Act allows them to do that. Our system has checks, double check, triple check. So I write a prescription and you take it to the pharmacy, and the pharmacy looks at it and he goes, wait a minute, if I give you this drug and you're taking this drug, that interaction can kill you. So that pharmacist is obligated by both his professional standards or her professional standards and by the law not to give me that drug, because he knows that it will be bad for me. And then he's supposed to get back with me and call me up and say, hey, Dr. Keiser, I want to talk to you about that. And I go, oh my God, I can't believe I've done that. And if you have an honest doctor, every one of them will tell you we've all done it, And so, but the pharmacist has the ability to say no. And so there are some pharmacists that they feel very strongly that this is not appropriate, it's not indicated by the FDA, and we shouldn't be prescribing it. So they're saying no, that it's a bad idea. And so that's how they can do it. Is it the right thing to do? That's a whole nother question or not, but they legally can do that.
And I'm glad you explained it that way. And thanks, Stephanie, for your question, because we've been hearing a lot about this, and it becomes a whole, just because your doctor says so doesn't mean necessarily happens. And I likened it to someone who had a question to me and said, well, how can they do that? I said, well, have you ever gotten your doctor to prescribe something your insurance company fights you with.
There you go.
And they go, oh yeah, all the time. I said, then you have to get on the horn and you have to go and you have to find, and then finally you get some type of thing worked out. But I said, it's not like that exactly, but it is. Everyone along the line has a finger in the pie, so to speak, or that. One of the things is I want to bring this up because someone had said, well, show me the study that shows it doesn't work. And I said, well, there's several clinical trials that are going on or are completed right now. I said, show me. And I always send them, and I'll bring it up right now, this link. And I'm going to put it up for all of our viewers too, so you can also find it, folks. Now, the tough thing about this is it's hard to read on the screen here. But this is through the FTC, clinicaltrials.gov. You can always, this is open. This is not some secret page you can go to. You can check out clinical trials all over the place with this, by the way, and can go in. And I've myself, I've gone to this several times because I've been interested in that, because it comes down to, as you said, Dr. Keiser, it comes down to people would like to take the magic pill that cures it all. I wish we had something like that for the flu, and as well, because it doesn't. And as you can see, there are some recruiting right now. There are some that they're getting ready to go. Some are ongoing. So there are 75 studies that the NIH tracks right now, and I'm just showing some of those on screen. So all you have to do, as I said, and I put the link on the site in there, and it's clinicaltrials.gov is where you can start, and you can find it on any of the clinical trials that's out there. The data is there. This top one, for example, you're seeing on your screen here, and it shows where it was done, by the way, in Turkey mainly, for these different hospitals in Turkey. And it showed that it really got down to 30 people, and showed that it had minimal results that involved. And 6 of those, actually, they were finding damage to those. They had 36 in the study, but had to pull 6 out because they were having side effects to the treatment, and pulled them out. So 6 out of 36 is a big chunk. You really don't want that in the clinical trial, thus why they pulled those 6 out. But just to give folks, there are studies being done. They're easy to find, and these are peer-reviewed. They are everything you talk about, the safety that's out there, and it's open to find. No one's hiding these from you. And you want to do your own research. I'm not telling you what the answers on all of these are at all, but not one of them has said it's an effective treatment. That is one thing. And I want to thank Dr. Sharma, who pointed this out to me some time ago, to look this up and to find out that information. So that's where folks can go. But it is something, though, for that. It is a debate, like you said, that goes into the debate. When we have Christine Hughes coming in right now, our viewer, it's great that they can check the interactions, but she doesn't agree it's their place to determine what you're allowed to take, what you aren't. And that becomes a thing. But it's also one of those things, too. I guess it's like, if you don't like how your doctor's treating you, you can go to another doctor.
Right.
You can go to another pharmacy.
Right.
It may be hard, but the best thing to do is at least go to someone who's licensed. And that is one of the that, but what you are finding is the concern, the FDA putting out an alert is, if you're going to go anywhere, go to someone who's licensed. At least do that much.
Yeah.
And you will find some who are licensed who will go ahead and go through with it. Yes, it may not be your local Walgreens. Yes, it may not be your local COVID. It may not be your local By-Right or any of those folks, but they do exist out there. So do check them out as well. Anyway, so that's and I just is there being goes into the deal. What is being done for that kind of magic pill treatment, though? Is there something being done out there?
Oh yeah. There are a couple. There are a couple things that are ongoing already. So the people that make remdesivir, Gilead Sciences, is working on making an oral form of that drug, and they've said that they may have something by early 2022. There's a couple other potential oral compounds that are being developed. None of them this year. But may be developed, available next year. I mean, and when we get to that point, hopefully this will be a lot better, because, you go to your doctor, you feel bad, you do the test. Is it flu? Oh, okay, we'll give you Tamiflu. Is it COVID? Oh, we'll give you whatever COVID kill-it-all is at that point, and it will really be a big game changer.
I wonder though too, because you bring up something, and that is that I heard this listening to a radio commentator the other day, and I found myself somewhat nodding, saying, "Yeah, I get it." That there seems to be this argument of, well, we've got to have the one size fit all kind of treatment. That's not always the case, but when we get to those things, flu, COVID, and the like, that seems to be it. Whereas in like cancer, in the like, there are different forms of treatments of cancer. Some are accepted, some aren't, and the like too. Is this a constant type of battle though within the medical field on anything, that there are those who are going to look for alternatives? The question comes is looking for alternatives that are safe, and also making sure you don't have the quacks who are coming up with alternatives. That's the real balance that's going on right now, and somebody has to take responsibility for that.
Yeah, and part of it, I think, goes back to what our expectation is, right? And so, we've all grown up in the era of antibiotics and penicillin. And so just think about how revolutionary penicillin was. You had all these bacteria infections you couldn't do anything for. And now suddenly you take a pill and it cures it, and it cures it within days. And so now that's become the standard for any type of anti-infective drug. We went through this with the AIDS epidemic very early on. We had no good drugs, and then we had a few good drugs, and then we had people smuggling drugs into the country. The Dallas Buyers Club. I can tell you, everything you saw in that movie was true. I was in Dallas around that time, and there was a lot of drugs being smuggled in. Some of them that worked, some of them that didn't work. Some of them were pure, and some of them that weren't pure. And then there were people that were, like you say, there were quacks that were coming up with crazy medicines that no, don't take that drug. Come to me. I'm a better doctor. I'll give you a really good therapy. And then they would sell people their nutritional supplements or vitamins or what have you. And, you would see a lot of that happen. But as time goes on and the medications get better and better, then you start to see less and less of that. So we're just in that phase of this at this point where we've got a disease that still kills people. It's pretty awful. It's pretty brutal death. And people want to do something about it, and particularly because we don't have those drugs that will really just get rid of it in everybody like penicillin did. It makes people reach out to try different and alternative things. And the treatments are invasive. You have to be in the hospital, you have to get IVs, you have to be in the hospital and be subject to, all the probing and prodding that goes with that. And the drugs all have toxicities, and so it's not perfect yet. We got a long way to go with this.
And obviously, another big subject, I think sometimes it's right up there with Ivermectin. Sorry, I just butcher that name every time I bring it up. Ivermectin.
Try saying it after you've had a few beers.
Well, yeah, right. I know. Right? I do joke about this. This is why they come up with weird names for drugs. That you think about, because if they stayed with the clinical names, none of us would ever pronounce them right along the way. But it comes into now, if the kind of the more of debated one that goes on as well is about schools and masks and what's being done in the schools. I find it interesting. This is going to be kind of the debut of this data. That the health district is actually going to be putting out itself. We don't know when yet. They're working on this.
Right.
But this kind of give our viewers a general overview of how things are going in schools in Galveston County.
Yeah, well, schools are seeing more cases. That's not a surprise. And every week for the past 4 weeks, we've seen more cases in schools. And we're seeing it in more younger kids, because they're basically unvaccinated. Kids under 12 are unvaccinated. Kids over 12, about 40, 50% of them are vaccinated. So not surprisingly, we're seeing a lot more cases among those age groups. There has been a lot of, turmoil about schools reopening. And unfortunately, it has been even more confused because the Texas Education Agency keeps changing their criteria. They just had another update again last week. But I think we're at a point where most of the schools are pretty much all the schools are on the same page. The schools are, basically telling students and parents, if your kid's sick, don't send them to school. If your kid comes to school sick, we're going to send them home. They're doing contact tracing, at least in our community they are. And they're letting parents know when kids are in the schools are sick and that their kids have been exposed. The schools are also having to do quite a bit of both testing and isolation around their staff. So if their staff gets positive with COVID, they get exposed to COVID, they have to test them twice before they let them back in the classroom. And so, so school teachers are being out as well. So what we've seen is that the numbers have gone up. They've gone up across all of the school districts. We've seen that the age of 0 to 10 is now our single largest age group with COVID in the county. That's all bad news. The good news is that they're not likely to get that sick. It's only a small number of them that are going to get sick. So what we're doing now is and what you're putting up on the screen now is something that we're working on, is to have a dashboard for schools. We're having a lot of parents and a lot of teachers and people from the community asking us about this. And so this will allow people to search by school district and by school to see what things are in the particular school where your child is going to school, and have some real-time information on that. And this will be automated and updated every day. And one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to be vetting the data that the schools give us. Not that they're not giving us the right information, but we want to make sure that what we're giving people is as truthful and as clear as possibly can be, and then also be very transparent about it.
We should point out what you're looking at now is the data that will eventually go into this dashboard that's there, and this is a week by week count. You see here where you see Clear Creek. We're using Clear Creek ISD first here, and you'll see 41 in week 1, 45 in week 2, 440 week 3, 503 in week 4. And where it's been 1,029. Now these aren't active cases right now, correct? These are just totals since.
These are total cases since the beginning of school. Gotcha. So week 1 is the first week that schools were open. And if you look at Clear Creek, or you look at it across all the school districts and all of them put together, you're going to see the same trend. And that, the first week they're a little, next week more, then a big jump, and then it's starting to plateau. So I'm hopeful the next week we'll continue to see a plateau with that. Clear Creek's numbers are higher in part because they are the largest school district. But if you look at the different schools, you'll see that you'll see some schools with very few cases, some schools with a lot of cases. And a lot of that is due to the fact that there may be a lot of COVID in the area around that particular school. So what's being reflected is the COVID epidemic in that community. And so ultimately what we want to be able to do is tie it back to what's going on into the local communities.
And that's what I was going to ask you next is that, for example, I'm just going to pick it randomly out of here. Calder Road Elementary, which is Dickinson ISD. That's not only the city of Dickinson, but also the city of League City. Mm-hmm. That primarily that district serves as that Bay Colony area. Mm-hmm. So if the Bay Colony area has if that's kind of tracked that way, I know it's more zip code than anything else, but if you're checking the Bay Colony area and you see more infections, how much is this going to be looked at to correlate community as well as just the school? Because one of the things I think we've talked about is a lot of times based on contact tracing, that what we were finding at the end of the school year this past year was that when students started coming back in person, we were seeing a number of cases. Most of those number of cases, however, were community spread versus in-campus spread. Right now, is that showing the same trend, or is it more of a mixed bag, or is it more it's a spread because of the campus or classroom?
I think it's a mixed bag. If you look at what's going on in the various communities, you'll find that Hitchcock ISD and Santa Fe ISD have the highest numbers of cases, but then we're seeing the largest number of cases in those areas as well. And so one of the things we do, and one of the things we're going to do, is we're going to report out as a percentage of the enrolled population. Okay, so what that means is that Clear Creek ISD, may have 1,000 cases, but remember, they've also got 40,000 students overall, 20-some thousand, which are in Galveston County. On the other hand, High Island, which nobody even thinks about, right? Last week, I think they had like one case, and they have 160 students, right? So we really have to look at those percentages. The one thing we have seen so far is that those districts with masking mandates have lower rates. So that's Texas City ISD and Galveston ISD have lower rates than some of the other ones. So, for example, Texas City, when you look at the larger school districts, had a rate of about 1.6%. Galveston was about 2.5%. And compare that to Clear Creek, which is a little over 3%. Okay, and then compare that to, say, like Hitchcock and Santa Fe, which is about 7 and 8% each. And so there's a trend toward having fewer infections if they're requiring everyone to wear masks. So what does that mean? That suggests that there is some transmission going on in schools, and that by having everyone wear masks, you're helping prevent some of that. You're not going to prevent it completely. It's even more complicated because all of the school districts are asking parents to have their kids wear masks. This is a very touchy subject. It's a hot topic. It's being litigated in the courts right now. The governor has said, you can't make mask mandates. Those that are doing it are going out on a limb, and we'll see what the courts say about that. But it does suggest that wearing masks does make a difference. So again, we're encouraging school districts to encourage the kids to wear masks. We're encouraging parents to have their kids wear masks. It's not a big deal. It's just another piece of clothing. There's some school districts that have got around, not in Galveston, but it got around the governor's mandate by making it a dress code requirement.
Right, and that's what Texas City ISD, they followed Paris ISD. In Texas City, it is dress code.
Yeah, right.
Requirement versus the other. And that's, by the way, that part has not been litigated yet.
That part is not being litigated, right? And the governor has not suspended that part of the Education Act. And
and that'll be an interesting one to see, because Galveston has stayed with what their original one, which was a decision by the superintendent to do it as a health and safety thing. Texas City took the Paris initiative, and I say Paris, not Paris, France, Paris, Texas,
right?
Initiative, which gained a lot of national attention. They did actually. Paris did it the night before, then Texas City did it the very next day.
Yeah,
and Texas City just beat the attention on it. I think we were pointing out there was dress code early on about that. Brings up this is a great question. Haram Duncan brings up is any comments about the packed no mask football stadiums over the weekend? Because no matter what, even Texas City or Galveston has said, they are not making these requirements for outdoor events.
Right. Well, they can't, right? Because if it's going to be a dress code, they can only do it within there. So I will say it'll be very interesting to see what happens in Texas City and Galveston this week and next week, because they played each other Friday night. Texas City won. And we'll,
I hate to bring it up to our Galveston viewers, but anyway. So.
Yeah, I mean, they got beat pretty soundly. We'll have to see what happens, right? Because here you've got two districts that have masking mandates, and then what happens when you have sporting events. What we found last year was when we saw big outbreaks in schools, they were usually centered around sporting events. So my bias, and this is as a father of a son who was a student athlete and was all-state football player, is that guys, the sport's probably not worth it for the time being. And I know I'm probably going to piss a lot of people off with that. I love high school football and I love high school wrestling, but it's probably not worth the risk. But people are going to do what we're going to do, and we'll learn something from it.
We should point out, when you say about the outbreaks, it was among athletes and not among necessarily those who went into the stadiums. The athletes who had more close contact. And
right. That's right. That's right. That's right. And it's particularly, and so schools can put in a lot of things to keep people separate and do all the social distancing, and then suddenly it's time for practice, and all that just goes away. And so it's a hard thing to do.
And again, we're going to find a way to post this data up on the schools for right now. What we have, James Britton had asked us, is what do the columns mean? I'll go over it again for those who joined in late. The left-hand column is the school district, then it's the school name, and then the list goes from there. Then it's week 1. This is when school classes started overall. Then week 2, week 3, week 4, then the grand total. Again, these are totals and not current. But there's also going to be something done with percentage. And by the way, this is there's also a breakdown of how many are staff and how many are students. There's another chart that we're not showing you here. Like, for example, it says administration here, where we can pretty much gather that's a staff member, not a student who hangs out in the administration building. So just to give a perspective, this is by campus right now totals. But will it be broken down like that? How many students and how many are staff, or are you going to leave it just?
Yeah, I think so. We're still in the development stage. What we're trying to do now is get all the data together in one place, and then we'll be working on the actual presentation of it.
All right, and we'll make this available to anyone who wants to see it too. It's a lot of data here. As I said, it's 1,029 cases within Clear Creek ISD total since they started. And they have, and each, by the way, and each of the school districts has their own kind of dashboard or chart that they're keeping. Right. So none of this is under wraps anywhere.
Right.
But
and TBA actually has a website you can go to where you can download all the data as an Excel spreadsheet. Right. But it's the entire state. I wouldn't advise you to do it. It's rather.
It was a lie. I went through it myself and was getting confused. That's why I was glad to hear this come out. But again, you have to take a perspective. 1,029 out of 40,000 plus students, plus how many ever staff and administrators there. What percentage of that? And as you said, it's roughly around 3% or a little. I got it was a little under 3%.
Yeah. So what we did in terms of the denominators, we included the schools that were in Galveston County. Okay. And we presented this to school superintendents, and they pointed out, well, not all the students at that school are necessarily in Galveston County or within that jurisdiction. So we're trying to work with them to try and figure out ways to correct for that as well.
Right.
That pushes Clear Creek over 3%. That only has about 20-some thousand students that are in Galveston County.
And the Galveston County side of things.
Right.
To put on. So it's going to have to be taken, just like the regular chart, folks. You're going to have to kind of take it, understanding, because I know for the longest time we would have the UTMB chart and then we'd have the health district chart. Folks said, well, those are wrong. Those are different. And we were talking about UTMB was reflecting its entire system.
Right.
All of its hospitals. And its patients weren't all just from Galveston County. The Galveston County numbers were just purely Galveston County residents. And then we even had a little bit of I call it not controversy, but a little bit of a brushback when Alvin all of a sudden got included. Well, we all discovered kind of the hard way in all of this that there is a part of the city of Alvin that's in Galveston County.
Right, a little part. Yep, that's right.
It's a small part, but it's there.
Yeah,
I think it's 2 houses. We figured it out. So it was one of those things. I think it did get rolled back in somehow because we were figuring out if you see someone pop up, it's one of 2 houses that had COVID in it. So it was kind of identifying a little bit more than you needed to. But so in any case, so that's how to kind of look at these. And this is again raw data, and it can go either way. But we just thought it would be good to show it and to let you know too that the Galveston County Health District is working on this data, so you can look at it from a perspective to see, all right, here's where my child goes to school. Here's data that has been vetted, not only just reported, but vetted by the health district as compared to and as what I have from the district. But now I can go and see has my district doing compared to others in the area, and to look at that. And then you can take that back even further and look at the community chart of the dashboard that the health district puts out from there. So anyway, so it's some interesting data there going through. The private schools are involved in here too, by the way.
Yep.
Mainland Classical, Our Lady of Fatima, St. Mary Catholic, all those. The charter schools are also in the listing here as well. You have down here Odyssey Academy, which makes up the whole list for all their campuses here. And then High Island, as you had mentioned, that's 9 cases. It's not a very large school district. So,
right.
And something to take a look at. So, any case, so this was something that they hope to have soon out that you can just go access anytime. When it is, we'll make sure we provide a link to that as well. But it's interesting stuff that I should point out, I found out about this data right before we went on the air. Dr. Keiser told me about it, and it goes to what I'm going to have to preach this a little bit harder now for folks. We're not trying to shove any information down your throats here, folks. We're just going to tell you the information as Dr. Keiser knows it. All I know is to ask questions, and I'll know some stuff in my own research, but I'm not an expert on any of this. But I do like to give people information within context, and that's important. That's why we have Dr. Keiser on most weeks with us here to talk about these subjects, and this is really good data to have there. So next week, join us because we're going to be talking. We're going to take a little bit of a veer with this next week. The area chambers of commerce are going to be coming on with Dr. Keiser and I. We're going to be talking about questions that business owners have about dealing with COVID moving forward, because it's not going to be just a, hey, give a shot and get a vaccine and all is better. Obviously, we have seen that's not been the case here. And we hope to have you join us with that because we're going to be looking for perspective of business owners dealing with their employees, dealing with their customers, and in different settings as well. That's coming up next Tuesday for our show next week. Dr. Keiser will be there. And we're hoping to have, I know we're going to have some business owners on with us who will have questions that a lot of businesses will have as well, and to hear from them, whether they're in the restaurants, whether they're in a regular office setting, whether they're in a high-rise office setting. It will hear from them about practical things they can do. And we're going to be doing that in partnership with the COVID-19 Business Task Force was set up by County Judge Mark Henry. Hank Doogie, the Mayor Pro Tem in League City, heads up that committee, and all the chambers of commerce in our area will be a part of this. So we'll have most of those chambers on with us as well. They've been gathering questions from their members, and that'll be next Tuesday, 2:30 right here on I-45 Now, Galveston Now, Clear Lake Now, on all of our platforms. So we appreciate it if you join us there. Philip, thanks again. As always, glad to have you on. I know it's always a busy time for you, and I do think we're catching you at a time. You had the holiday, so you've got to also get to running Coastal Health and Wellness, as well as the health district as well at the same time. And we'll be talking more and more about different things available on that end as well. So, Dr. Keiser, thanks for coming on. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
All right. If you have any other questions, you can send them. I always say questions during the week to bring up to Dr. Keiser. And many of the questions you heard me ask today were actually from viewers who sent them out to me during the week. And as always, we do take your questions here as well. I'm TJ All. It's I-45 Now.